Atlantis has intrigued mankind since the beginning of time. From the hidden valleys of Tibet and the stunning pyramids of Mexico, to the icy wastes of the Antarctic and the deepest ocean trenches, our search for Atlantis will take us all across the world to seek out ancient clues of a civilization that perished before history had even begun. An object of endless fascination and relentless obsession, it is a quest through time and space to pivotal moments in human history, as well as the dark side of man's longing for perfection. The myth of Atlantis has cast its spell over generations, each trying to find its own unique vision of this lost idyllic paradise. Our journey will take us across oceans and continents and span 10,000 years of human history, a journey to find a magical lost world. Century, a new fad swept America. Spiritualism took the country by storm. Here in the New York apartment of an eccentric Russian aristocrat, the story of Atlantis was about to move into a whole new dimension. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky arrived in New York in 1873, penniless after years of traveling the world. But she was soon to become one of the greatest occult gurus of the modern era, the herald of a new age of spirituality in which Atlantis would hold the key to cosmic enlightenment.
She was very ugly, in conventional terms, and her dress sense was not very good. Somebody once described her as a badly wrapped parcel, or as looking like a badly wrapped parcel. She smoked like a trooper. She swore like a trooper in broken English. She had gross eating habits. She's thought very rarely to have washed. And so she wasn't really a very good proposition in terms of any gainful employment. The only talent she claimed to have was an affinity with spirits.
With her air of cultivated mystery, her almost incomprehensible Russian accent, and her outlandish behavior, Madame Blavatsky soon became one of the stars of the New York seance scene, revealing to her guests through a series of bizarre spiritual contacts that she was in communication with mysterious forces. Mysterious forces from Atlantis. Although exposed as a trickster on numerous occasions, somehow Madame Blavatsky's appeal just kept on increasing. Before long, Madame Blavatsky attracted the attention of Colonel Henry Alcott, a former member of the committee that had investigated President Lincoln's assassination. The two soon moved in together.
They called each other Jack and Maloney, which doesn't suggest a sexual relationship, but they did live together. They lived together perhaps as pals, chums, friends.
Mysterious letters soon began appearing all over the apartment. Written in her own handwriting, Blavatsky claimed these materialized letters had been dictated to her by cosmic masters who were eager to inform Alcott of their shared mission. The messages told him he'd been admitted into the secret order of these cosmic masters, whose ranks included such great spiritual teachers as Christ, Buddha, Confucius, Solomon, and Plato.
But very few people are admitted to this wisdom, and the knowledge of Atlantis is part of that wisdom. Because, of course, the continent of Atlantis was the original settlement of these arriving cosmic masters coming from a different part of the universe to set up, as it were, human life, or what was to become human life.
After Atlantis' destruction, the cosmic masters had retreated to hidden valleys in the Himalayan mountains, venturing out only rarely to monitor the progress of the human race. Blavatsky claimed she had first encountered these cosmic masters when she herself had been traveling in Tibet many years before. Now, after an apprenticeship of 20 years, the cosmic masters wanted her to bring about a new age of spiritual enlightenment, with Olcott's help. In 1875, the two companions set up an organization dedicated to universal brotherhood, the investigation of man's latent psychic powers, and spreading the wisdom of the East to the West. They called it the Theosophical Society. Incredibly, within a decade, they had branches all over the world, including India, where Mahatma Gandhi would become a member.
You could say that without it, the New Age wouldn't exist. And so in that sense, it's had many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of heirs who are members of other religious movements which owe a great deal to Theosophy.
There were, however, contradictions. From the very start, it was clear to Colonel Olcott that the woman entrusted with leading this new age of Atlantean spirituality was anything but a model of Eastern serenity and contemplation.
He was a natural administrator in a way, with a great deal of experience. She was an oddball. She was an eccentric, she was headstrong, she was reckless, she was mad, she loved stirring up trouble, she loved dramas, she loved scenes, she loved screaming, swearing, she loved upsetting people, she wanted excitement.
In 1888, Blavatsky wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine, in which she attempted to establish the principles of theosophy, or God wisdom, that the cosmic masters had imparted to her. Blavatsky cited most of Donnelly's theories about Atlantis with approval, but she had one major disagreement. In her opinion, Donnelly's belief in Darwin was a grave error, and in one corner of her room sat a stuffed baboon as a constant reminder of how wrong she thought the theory of evolution was. Instead, Blavatsky proposed that the cosmic masters of Atlantis had been the real progenitors of the human race.
Occultism rejects the idea that nature developed man from the ape, tracing the origin of the species to the third race man of the early Atlantean period.
Blavatsky argued that while some peoples, notably the Aryan Hindus, had retained the Atlantean purity of their ancient ancestors, others had not.
The Aryan Hindu belongs to the oldest race now on Earth, the Semite Hebrew to the latest. There was a day when the Israelites had beliefs as pure as the Aryans, but now Judaism has become a religion of hate and malice.
Blavatsky's linking of Atlantis to ideas of racial superiority would later be seized upon by the most sinister forces of the 20th century. Madame Blavatsky died in 1891, and true to form, the grandmother of the New Age refused to go quietly.
Last years, alas, were fraught with endless dramas, because although she had officially retired from the Theosophical Society, she couldn't stop meddling. And being a hellraiser, she took every possible opportunity to stir the pot. So she died rather sadly, really, because she was in the middle of a maelstrom of anger and scandal when she died. But somehow that's entirely appropriate. One feels she rather enjoyed it.
Madame Blavatsky's ideas cast a long shadow over the story of Atlantis, providing fertile ground for the myth-makers of New Age spirituality. But ironically, it would be the propagandists of the Third Reich who would first seize upon her theories of a pure Atlantean race. The year is 1933, and in Central America, one of the forgotten chapters in the story of Atlantis is about to unfold. Deep in the Guatemalan jungle, a German archaeological expedition believes it has unearthed finds which challenge many of our most cherished ideas about human evolution. Buried deep in the earth are the mortal remains of a people who don't even appear to be human. Remains which local people believe to be the forgotten race of Atlantis.
Platne kartice Nove banke i svijet vam je kao na dlanu.
From the moment the Nazis seized power in Germany in 1933, they inaugurated a series of quests in search of fabulous objects and places from mankind's earliest myths. The Lost Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Longinus, which pierced Christ's side, and the lost continent of Atlantis. For Adolf Hitler, such places and objects held a dark promise of secret knowledge and limitless power. If the Nazis could find them, their armies would be invincible. Missions were dispatched all over the world from Wewelsburg Castle, the sinister heart of the Third Reich. Built on the intersection of four prehistoric pathways called ley lines, Wewelsburg was believed to lie in a zone of magical earth power, and thus a fitting place for the home of the Nazis' most elite troops, the dreaded SS.
Never forget, we are a knightly order, from which we cannot withdraw, to which we are recruited by blood.
Headed by Hitler's trusted lieutenant, Heinrich Himmler, the SS modeled themselves on an order of knights. The purest members of the Aryan race, they were the only men considered fit enough to pursue such ancient secrets as Atlantis.
The search for these sorts of objects had a dual purpose. On the one hand, it made for great publicity. I mean, this kind of stuff just looks good in the headlines, you know, where the archaeologists out looking for the Ark, or have found the Spear of Longinus and it's coming to Berlin. And, you know, the archaeologists actually were out there in teams looking for these types of objects. That is, in fact, an accurate element in Spielberg's films. In fact, there was a major concern within the profession that German archaeologists were going to become the laughingstock of their colleagues outside of Germany because of this type of lunatic fringe research.
How and why German archaeologists became so obsessed with pursuing these mythical objects and places has its roots in the disaster of World War I and its terrible aftermath, in which the myth of Atlantis played a fateful role in the Nazis' rise to power. The Great War had been greeted almost with celebration. After decades of peace, European leaders saw a chance for the manhood of their nations to be tested.
Many people at the outset of the First World War, many extremely distinguished, sensitive, refined people, were to be found writing paeans in praise of the war, of the anticipated slaughter, because they believed it would spiritually purify Europe. But they didn't believe that for long.
By the war's end, millions lay dead, and the map of Europe had been completely redrawn. Defeated by the Allies, the German and Austro-Hungarian empires fragmented, leaving German-speaking people all over Europe feeling humiliated and deeply insecure. Military disaster brought economic disaster, and Germany plunged into chaos, an unstable hotbed of hyperinflation and extremist politics. Insecure about themselves and their role in the world, Germans turned to history, hoping that in the ancient past they might find a way to reinvent themselves in the present.
we're dealing with a nation in the 1920s in Germany, which is going through a kind of identity crisis. It's feeling underappreciated, and obviously it's in search of symbolism that will allow it to feel better about itself. Basically, it's sort of a self-esteem issue. And archaeology was one of the ways that, that Germans attempted to kind of create a picture of themselves that they could be proud of.
As archaeologists began excavating Germany's remote past, so a number of Volkisch, or people groups, sprung up all over the country. Formed to promote the unity of German-speaking peoples all over Europe, these Volkisch movements organized festivals and sports events, which celebrated the strength and vitality of the German race. Their members were also among the keenest advocates of a number of extremely unorthodox ideas that linked Germany's past with the myth of Atlantis. Published in the 1930s, the novels of Edmund Kiss told the story of how in the long-forgotten past, an ice moon from deep space had collided with the Earth, bringing with it the seed of Aryan man. Naturally superior to the ape men of the Earth, this Aryan race had established the world's first civilization on islands in the Atlantic Ocean, Atlantis. Most incredible of all, Kiss's novels were not meant to be purely fantasy. They were based on ideas which many Germans actually believed to be fact.
Edmund Kiss published a series of novels, at least 4 that I know of. The Glassy Sea, The Spring in Atlantis, The Last Queen of Atlantis, and then there's the sort of diaspora novel that talks about the eventual migration to South America. And these seem to have been quite popular. Certainly Himmler was a big fan, and Hitler believed that they were a true-to-life, if fictionalized representation of what actually happened.
Kiss's Atlantean city closely resembled Plato's, but in the place of a fantastic temple in the center of the city, Kiss put a vast war office, echoing plans for the Nazis' rebuilding of Berlin. From here, the purest and most noble Atlantean leaders ruled an empire that spanned from the first cities of South America to the classical civilization of Greece. As Kiss wrote,
"Only time will tell where the limits of our land. We must build a community that will demonstrate to all the visible signs of our land. The whiteness of our skin, the blueness of our eyes, our freedom of spirit uncorrupted by the base superstitions of religion."
Yet, ice moon from deep space had brought the Atlanteans to Earth, though many ages later, another would bring about their doom, colliding with the Earth and destroying the continent. Kiss tells us that Atlanteans returned to the Arctic North, seeking safety in the ice and snow, which had once given birth to them. Far away from inferior races that might tarnish their noble bloodlines, the Aryans of Atlantis rejuvenated, purified by the icy environment of the North. And here they were reborn as the Germans, awaiting the day when a leader would emerge to resurrect the Aryan Empire of Atlantis once more.
What Hitler and Himmler both seemed to like most about this was the cyclical nature of it, and the fact that you could extend Kiss's ideas into the present by arguing Germany was again going through these periods where it had to purge itself, where it had to be tested, basically. It was beginning to become compromised in its superiority and purity, and that, of course, you need a leader to guide you through this dark period, and Hitler was that. So from a propaganda perspective, Kiss's novels were gold for people like Himmler.
Enthralled by the concept of an Aryan Atlantis, German expeditions departed for Central America, where deep in the forest of Guatemala, they set about investigating the overgrown ruins of the Mayan civilization. A civilization that had reached its height long after the date given by Plato for Atlantis' destruction, it was nonetheless here that archaeologists unearthed strangely misshapen skulls that local people claimed to be those of Atlantidom. This documentary film, lost in the German archives, played to packed audiences in German movie theaters in 1933. Not wanting to dispel the illusion of a great find, the archaeologists remained what they had really discovered. These misshapen skulls were actually the result of an ancient Native American practice, in which the heads of young children are bound and deformed for religious reasons. But the Third Reich's obsession with Atlantis and other myths went much further than appeasing the German public's appetite for mystery. In 1934, a year after this film about Atlantis was made, Himmler formed the Ahnenerbe, a specialist division of the SS, recruited from some of the country's best universities. Though many members didn't yet know it, the Ahnenerbe's aim was no less the reinvention of German history. The academics and archaeologists who joined the Ahnenerbe soon found their leader to be a difficult and troublesome taskmaster.
He had a habit of getting, 3 o'clock in the morning, getting a sudden inspiration, writing down a memo, find out why butterflies move, or why crows tend to sort of get places of execution, and he'd send this off to the appropriate unit, and you can imagine that someone at his desk, and they're looking at it thinking, where did that come from? And if you were lucky, he'd forget about it.
Kako izgleda? Da, sjajna. Kako ti je kosa tako sjajna?
I tvoja može da bude takva.
Misli, i bujna i sjajna.
Fruity Power šamponom.
Wash and Go Fruity Power, obogaćen esencijom voća, podiže vlasi pravo iz korijena, dajući vašoj kosi bujnost i blistavi. Wash and Go Fruity Power, bujna kosa, uvijek primijećena.
U četvrtak 18. avgusta, samo uz Glas Srpske, na svim prodajnim mjestima novi CD, Toše Projeski, Pratim te, za samo 6 konvertibilnih maraka, 14 hitova. Četvrtak 18. avgusta, samo uz Glas Srpske.
Uvijek ste u pokretu. Želite fleksibilnu, ali i postojanu frizuru na koju možete računati. Belaflex. Vaša frizura ima fleksibilnu čvrstinu, pun života tokom čitavog dana. Zahvaljujući inovativnoj 24-osatnoj Flex Active formuli. Belaflex od Belle.
When war broke out in 1939 and German armies swept across Europe, the scientists of the SS Ahnenerbe followed in their wake, using archaeology to claim that the Nazis weren't conquering territory. They were merely reclaiming land once belonged to the Aryan race. As the war progressed, the myth of Atlantis began to assume a far more malign role. The lost, pure homeland of Atlantis now became the model for the new Nazi Germany.
That meant moving elements on Nordic from the population, from the breeding population, and from the culture. And genocide then becomes an option. So I think the Atlantis myth plays a role there quite definitely.
Generally, myths of the Golden Age are extremely double-edged because they give authority and they give legitimacy to ideas which may otherwise find no justification.
Archaeologists and academics joined the SS Ahnenerbe, imagining they were knights of new order, searching for the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, in Atlantis, now found themselves justifying and implementing the indescribable terror of the Holocaust.
You could not claim today, although people have tried, that, oh, we were just archaeologists, we didn't have anything to do with the medical research or whatever was going on in the camps. That's not strictly true. Because in effect, it made it impossible to completely remove some other was part of this organic sort of web that had been created.
At the war's end, the full extent of the Holocaust became horrifyingly clear. Him, chief of the executioner by while his foot soldiers, the men of the SS Ahnenerbe, slipped quietly back into civilian life, anonymous, forgotten, and unpunished. The myth of Atlantis had come full circle, transformed from the idea of an earth into the idea behind a genocidal nightmare. Most of the men of the Ahnenerbe escaped punishment for their role in the atrocities.
Archaeologists who survived the war seem to have done a pretty effective cleanup job in the archives.
Atlantis' connection with the Third Reich was forgotten. Nazi propaganda had harnessed the myth of Atlantis for deadly intent. But across the Atlantic, mythmakers of an entirely different sort were also reinventing Atlantis as pure fantasy. Hollywood. Most of all Atlantis movies is probably the 1961 Atlantis: The Lost Continent, in which a humble Greek fisherman called Odysseus saves the beautiful princess Antilia from the evil masters of Atlantis. But The Lost Continent was only the most memorable of a whole genre of movie adventure materials that can reinvent Atlantis.
There's something about the Atlantis that everybody loves. And even now, recently people used it in novels. There are serials made in the 1930s about Crash and the undersea kingdom of Atlantis. A wonderful kind of idea of Crash on a horse riding through Atlantis, which looked very, very much like the monument in the American West, because I think they just happened there and they said, Atlantis movie, okay, put some in your head, do that.
From the man from Atlantis to help protect the free world, to the warlords of Atlantis who wanted to enslave it, Atlantis has been portrayed in almost every conceivable way as a real. Astonishingly, that would all suddenly change. In the late 19th century, archaeological discoveries would bring Atlantis hurtling from the realm of fantasy and Hollywood B-movies onto the front pages of newspapers around the world. Hidden in a rock on the Greek island of Santorini, scientists unearthed the lost city of a forgotten people, destroyed in an unimaginable catastrophe. All the elements finally seemed to fit, and the great city of legend would now make the world of science sit up and take notice. One called Thera is a beautiful collection of small Mediterranean islands encircling a central volcanic hub. With its breathtaking views and stunning sunsets, Santorini is a magnet for tourists from all over the world who visit to sample the unique culture of the Greek island. Santorini is much more than a picturesque holiday retreat. Hidden under layers of volcanic rock are the remains of a once proud city that perished in a terrible calamity over 35 centuries ago. A city whose destruction many people believe gave rise to the myth of the story of this momentous archaeological find began in the 19th century on another Mediterranean island, 70 miles from an island called Crete. In 1899, the archaeologist Arthur had begun unearthing Crete, a mysterious civilization which seemed to have been completely forgotten by history. heavens under remains of a powerful sea-trading people who worshipped the bull and built large labyrinthine buildings. Factors which encouraged culture after Minos, a mythological figure from Greek history, said to have been the father of Minotaur.
The Minoans are probably the single greatest mystery in all of classical history. We don't really know where they came from, and certainly don't know what happened to them. Building the labyrinth and making these fabulous frescoes long before anybody else was doing it. 1500 BC. Remember the Platon and Plato himself existed around 350 BC.
It was while excavating a Minoan villa on Crete, some 3 after Rabbit, that archaeologist Spiridon Maronatos discovered evidence of a huge volcanic explosion.
When he reached the foundation, he found a large quantity of volcanic pumice. And so he thought, what is going on? Was there a volcano? Well, the volcano of Santorini. When did...
Based on provisional calculations, Maronatos estimated that the volcano of Santorini had erupted in around 1500 BC. It was a cataclysmic explosion. The center of Santorini was open as 50 cubic miles of rock. Debris was hurled as Egypt and Israel. Gigantic tsunamis overwhelmed coastlines everywhere in the Mediterranean. And shocks were felt all over the world. The island of Santorini was shattered into fragments of its self.
It's the cataclysm as violent as explosion of that dimension. It's like the extinction of the dinosaurs. It's a dramatic event that it must have been recorded in history somehow. And the only evidence we've got of this recorded in oral tradition is the Atlantis myth.
Convinced that the explosion of Santorini had the secrets of the sudden demise of the North, Maronatos descended Santorini itself, further evidence of this lost civilization. But war and a lack of funds held them back until 1967, when almost immediately they discovered the remains of an ancient city, Akrotiri.
First trial spot hit exactly on the city of Akrotiri.
Maronatos headlines in the world. A forgotten people from ancient history wiped out in one apocalyptic blast. Surely this was their life basis for the myth of the...
I think it was the spirit of the times, the whole of my capitalized on the fact that myths are true. It's a constant reality of the past. So as a result of that, also search, we will find this core of truth. So in the late 60s and especially 70s, people thought they had found scientific information for the end of a culture. And the next step to say, well, that's Atlantis.
Entombed by a 30-foot layer of volcanic pumice for more than a half, the city was close to the ruins of Minoan Crete. Hundreds of thousands of years ahead of its time, among the city's ruins was evidence of complex drainage, showers, flushing toilets, even hot and cold running water. Here too were exquisite wall paintings, their rich colors of confinement, matter unlike anything previously discovered in the region.
We look at the frescoes of the very free-flowing, beautiful art, and it's scholarship of the mental people without any violence in them. We find that the city and palaces of Crete are not fortified. So again, we get this vision of...
Clearly the Minoans had been an exceptional and artistic people, far ahead of their contemporaries in many fields. But were they really the Atlanteans of legend? There were both many similarities and many differences between those stories of Atlantis and the discoveries on Santorini and Crete. Atlanteans Minoans had been in contact with the earliest Greeks as well as Egyptians. Minoans appeared from history near 900 to 9,000 years before Plato's time. And even though only a fraction of the excavated, so far resemblance to the city of Atlantis acquired by Plato, it is certainly nowhere near the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Academic opinion remains divided.
What Marinatos found was very important. He was able to produce evidence which could form the basis for at least part of the story of Atlantis, but part of it. And that
there is no comparison whatsoever between the Minoans and the Atlanteans. The Minoans had a high level of culture, but nothing extraordinary. It was a very open society, and they had air, but it was run by a fleet, none of which seems to fit the description of Atlantis at all.
Nevertheless, there is one group of people who stick firmly to the belief that was Atlantis themselves.
The islands of Santorini, the residents of Santorini, obviously have a vested interest in making sure that tourists think that they have found the lost continent of Atlantis. And what do you get to do with that? You get to claim Santorini as one of the most important spots on Earth. Sell a lot of shirts and mugs. Anything that is possible with the word Atlantis on it.
The entrepreneurs of Santorini would soon find they had competition in laying claim to the riches associated with Atlantis. Only months after Akrotiri was unearthed, the hippie culture of the 1960s discovered its own Atlantis, and a very different age of the law. In the summer of 1968, the occupants of a small plane flying off the coast of Bimini near Florida spotted mysterious shapes in the clear waters. The sight quickly attracted huge interest, especially when monuments were also found. Known as the Bimini Road, could these strange, misshapen rocks be the corroded ruins of ancient Atlantis? Their sudden dramatic appearance had been foretold by one of America's most famous clairvoyants, Edgar Casey, called the sleeping prophet of the trance state and liberty. Casey predicted that Atlantis would rise again in 1967 and 1968. The circumstances of the discovery cast a shadow of doubt on those in Atlantis. Not only had the Bimini Road been discovered by followers, it also had been sponsored by a wealthy businessman to locate gold, oil, or other mineral deposits in the Bahamas. Unfortunately, on this occasion, Casey's powers seem to have abandoned him.
I've heard that Casey was in the employ of businessmen who believed that he could actually find gold, and he then decided Atlantis as some kind of a substitute for that.
The fragments of ancient monuments also have another explanation that is far removed from the Atlantis. Almost certainly the remains of ships dating back to the time of Columbus, when ships needed to take on board and later dump extra weight.
What that Dawson ship you want to see? He just built the stone, and there all of a sudden is a Corinthian capital from Rome for what have you in the Caribbean.
Casey also prophesied that a long-lost haul of Atlantean records would discover the Sphinx in 1990. Unfortunately, these records have so far failed to materialize, further discrediting Casey's prophecies that Atlantis would rise again.
The Atlantis legend, if you like, has become a religion. It's a new age religion. It's for all those people who are the conventional churches have. I think modern people look to find something they can believe, even if it's not reachable, not attainable. So they search utopia, fabulous land, and try and believe even though they can never really find it.
But hope springs eternal. Using a dazzling array of high-tech and low-tech equipment, skepticism of conventional a new breed of fringe researcher continues to search for Atlantis. Is it a search with an end, or will advances in new technology finally reveal the location of lost Atlantis? Based in Torbay, England, Jim Allen, former photography analyst, British, and it is by analyzing aerial photography that Jim Allen believes he has discovered one of the lost continent's most distinctive landmarks, the vast irrigated of Atlantis.
Many people talk about Atlantis, a lost continent, so they didn't want to call it, but nobody bothers to talk about the rectangular plain. A large part of the later story, geographic description of this actual area.
Allen believes the continent of Atlantis was actually South America. In the rugged floodplain in Bolivia, called the Altiplano, Jim thinks he has found a plain which Plato described.
There was a plain said to have been the fairest and very fertile. It was smooth and of oblong shape, and canals of 100 feet were cut through it.
Could the Altiplano of Bolivia really have been the plain of Atlantis? Despite several expeditions, Jim has found concrete elusive. Academic even examine his ideas.
Well, some time ago I wrote to a leading archaeologist in Cambridge who was the head of Cambridge College, and he read all my material exam and wrote, Atlantis is a subject in which I have never been interested, and I think that reflects the archaeological opinion of the world.
Undeterred, Jim hopes that the answer will eventually force skeptical experts to sit up and take notice of what he believes is a watertight theory.
Modern technology, the satellite available in the last 20 or 30 years, shows we can prove quite positively this is the elongated rectangular plane that Plato talked about.
Jim in hoping that modern technology will reveal the location of the lost continent. Based in British Columbia, Canada, Plymouth also believes that satellite technology holds the key to finding Atlantis. Rand believes that an ancient catastrophic geological event shifted the axis of the Earth over its molten core, moving the location of Atlantis from the temperate Atlantic to the South Pole. A theory called Earth's crust displacement. It is some notable supporters, and Einstein, whose to many pages.
To imagine an Earth crust displacement, you think of an orange and you take off the peel, and then, but if lubricant in between, say the peel and the flesh of the peel, it's just the crust that's moved. The rest of everything remains stable.
A few Atlanteans managed to survive an unimaginable disaster and went to find the earliest known civilizations, leaving to history many monuments of the world. From esoteric and mathematical clues contained within these monuments, Rand believes he has managed to decode the exact location, still buried under miles of Antarctic ice.
Found very specific coordinates on Antarctica that have a striking object beneath the ice about 1,400 meters, about a mile down, which can be seen by satellite.
The locate Atlantis satellite is doomed to failure from the start.
These people believed that the ice sheet kind of rotated like the loose skin of an orange and managed to find Atlantis. The ice moves. The plates of the Earth move. Both of these things actually happen. But what does happen is the sheet existing civilizations. If ice moves the way a glacier moves, on existing civilization.
Skepticism is normal in science. This is a preserver. And in the location that we're looking at, we're hoping that there is still something there. But who knows? 12,000 years is a long time.
Technology will prove the ideas of first century Atlantis seekers like or Jim Allen correct. Through the ages, Atlantis hunters have diligently followed the clues laid out in Plato's 2,000-year-old description. But is it a description of fact or fiction?
I think Plato used real characters so people would accept it as truth. I think, however, that Plato knew he was writing fiction. Plato I don't think that Plato believed a word of it.
But what might have inspired Plato to invent such a story? In 399 BC, Plato's revered tutor, the great philosopher Socrates, was arrested at night. Dragged before an open court, he was charged with corrupting the morals of Athens with outspoken philosophical ideas and sentenced to death. A fate he accepted without bitterness or regret.
Men of Athens, I honor and love you, but understand all my ways, not even have I many times. For if you kill one such as I, you will injure yourselves, then you injure.
Surrounded by his closest friends and disciples, Socrates calmly drank poison and passed the great figures of Western civilization. But Plato could not be consoled.
Plato thinks of Socrates as the best and the kindest, justest man, and he sees Athens, a city he loves, turn against him and kill him. That, I believe. So a lot of Plato's effort to imagine alternative political and organizations in which the horrible that he's having in the case of Socrates could never happen again. He would like ideally to create a world in which philosophy, in the person of Socrates, was forever safe.
One of these ideal cities, where a creature like Socrates would be safe and respected, is described in Plato's story about Atlantis. How the ideal city is not, in fact, Atlantis.
Of course, one would say, oh, it's Atlantis. No, it isn't. It's Athens. It is the ancient Athens of the Atlantis, which has all the features Plato associates with this imaginary ideal state that he has just described.
So after these years, this may be no more than a story invented by Plato to compensate for the tragic loss of his mentor, Socrates. Resident still, realm of the new age, and a substitute, a space shuttle voyaging like Columbus into new uncharted domains. Even a gigantic billion-dollar holiday resort where the excesses of Atlantis are all too real.
So we have an Atlantis in our time now. There is a resort in the Bahamas called Atlantis, and it's everything that Plato said it was, and this to me is the epitome of at least part of our current civilization, and might even be argued that it's the fall of contemporary civilization.
Each period in history, I think, both the accomplishment of Atlantis and the reason for its function.
This is probably how the myth has always functioned, how many Golden Age myths have always functioned. Things that admire
which the climate trade.
A myth that reaches back in time to a lost golden age. Atlantis has haunted the pages of history, a restless, inconsolable spirit. A mirage sought in every age, in the paradise of riches, the cradle of our ancient civilization, an undersea ruin that captivated the world, and a mystical homeland where humanity's highest aspirations and most dangerous fantasies of perfection. The search for Atlantis goes on. Many of us just get the idea that in the gloomy deep, Atlantis still lies, awaiting the day when some bold adventurer of new technology finally brings its secrets to light. Until that day, if it ever comes, Atlantis will remain only in the depths of the imagination.